All right, visual effects gang. Hey, when we get started here, the first thing you might want to know is exactly what are visual effects. Now, visual effects are actually misunderstood by a lot of people. In fact, the name of this class is a bit of a misnomer. And what I want to try to do is kind of put these confusions to rest and kind of get everything going on the same page here. So we're going to discuss exactly what effects are. Maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't, but keep your eyes and ears open and at least your mind open for at least the next couple of minutes. But anyway, what are visual effects? Well, you know that you've got when you're creating games, you've got characters. And you've got the character meshes, you got your rigs, and you got your joints, and you got your meshes and all the other stuff associated with that. And then you got animation. And then you have your characters, and they interact with the environments and so forth. And the environments are meshes, and then they are other props and other things in there. And sometimes the characters interact with the environments, and sometimes the environments interact with the characters, and so forth. But needless to say, they kind of like have some kind of overlap, but they are kind of like two separate entities. And then you can have your keyframe animation, which is kind of like a combination of both, because then you can have keyframe characters, and you can have keyframe articulated environment props and so forth. And so they all kind of just generally interact with each other. There's some area of intersection in between, but not a whole lot. But they kind of like do interact with each other. Okay, then what are visual effects? Okay, visual effects is everything that's not characters, environments, or keyframe animation. Everything else is visual effects, and visual effects covers just about anything and everything. And that's one of the reasons why visual effects are such a abstract rabbit hole that you could fall into and never come out of in a happy sort of way. Um, because it's just so immense. You really can't learn everything there is to know about visual effects. You always got to keep on learning. Aha, yeah, there it is. All right, so you might want to know what are the difference between real-time and offline visual effects. Well, offline is what they do on movies and television and film, and this is anything that's done to the film or video after the image has been exposed. And quite often, when you have a film or a television, it's going to go through a final coloration before it's broadcast or sent over the internet or what have you. And so everything that is done to the image after the initial exposure and before the final color adjustment is done is considered a visual effect. And in fact, everything considering about animation and characters and environments and so forth back in the old days used to be considered all as visual effects. So they're a little bit more departmental wise now, but visual effects is everything done to the image after the exposure and before the final color adjusts. And well, technically they have an unlimited, but that's not exactly true. Typically there's deadlines, but compared to online time, they have virtually all the time in the world in order to actually do the processing. Okay, in real-time processing, however, you're still dealing with articulated characters, you're dealing with emotions, you got the props, the sets, the environments, all the other assets, and so forth. Okay, visual effects are just another actor inside of the game. All right, so that means the visual effect could be an articulated character, and it could be some motion, although the articulated character would not be keyframe animated, it would be procedurally generated. You're going to have props, sets, and environments, and unless the artist created those, that means a visual effect artist needed to create them probably once again procedurally and all the other assets in the other scenes, and they come in just as another actor because they need to be rendered and created dynamically in context of the game, just like all that other stuff. So visual effects is really just another actor. Now, you might be saying, yeah, well, what about special effects? Now, special effects are a different critter. They are anything extraordinary that can be captured with live action. Makeup makes for great special effects. And there you have a guy in a suit, which is really, really awesome. And then you have, if somebody was to blast through some glass, the glass itself is what's called a special effect. because it explodes on impact. Now, believe it or not, that's not actually glass that this this woman is diving through. She's actually diving through a pane of transparent sugar that explodes and shatters a lot like glass is, and that's a special effect. When you need a door to close on cue and you need a toilet to flush when you want it to, that is a special effect. And here are some more visual effects. Pyro is notorious special effects. Blowing up buildings and blowing up stuff in the contest and getting things to kind of implode in natural physical reactions. If you have no, actually, models are kind of like uh, those are visual effects, but anything big that is going to be captured with the live action, that is a special effect. And guess what? There are no real-time special effects. That just doesn't exist because all special effects take some planning, and they usually, most visual effects can only be achieved once. Now, certain special effects can be done more than once, like the exploding toilet and the open and closing door, but everything when it comes down to like makeup and explosions and implosions and destruction can only be done once. So make sure that you've got all your cameras on. All right. Visual effects is animation. In my humble opinion, if it's not moving, it's just a pretty picture. Now, back in when I was working in Hollywood, we had folks that would actually create vast vistas and they would paint enormously ornate and beautiful landscapes that didn't move. And those were called matte paintings. Now, matte paintings, could be justified as a visual effect, but other than the matte paintings themselves, if it wasn't moving, it's just a pretty picture. And so, therefore, if everything has got to be moving, guess what? If you want to master visual effects, you have to master animation. And that means jump on there to understand and study the 12 principles of animation. Okay, the 12 principles of animation is where visual effects actually flowed from. Back in the old days, everybody who was a visual effects person had a background in animation. Now, I have a personal beef, and I'm just going to put it out there. A lot of people think that they can become visual effects artists because all they have to do is become a button pusher or a slider puller. And then all they have to do is hit the magic button, and then they can become and design their own visual effects. All right. If that is the case, there are opportunities, especially at an entry-level position, where you want to be a button pusher or a slider puller, you can do that. But in my humble opinion, don't study visual effects. You're wasting your time. What you should be studying then is animation. And there are lots and lots of really awesome references about that, especially if you're into the modern sprite animation, which is really prominent and very popular in today's games. One is like from Joseph Galland, Elemental Magic. This is an awesome book. Go through this, go through the exercises, study the animation that goes into this. Here's another book by Mario Maressa, The Essential Effects for Water, Fire, Wind, and More. This shows really good on how to animate for visual effects and so forth. And so, if you don't really want to study visual effects, then study the animation. And these are awesome references. And everyone who's like getting involved with, who wants to be into this kind of animation, these are an absolutely must-haves. And regretfully, we don't have time to go over it because there's just too much to cover otherwise. But if you want to try to get into this area, you got to study these books. This is a must-have, gang. All right, simulation versus keyframe. Keyframe is where you're dealing with articulated characters. That means you got joints in the elbows and the knees and the back and so forth, and the arms move around and so forth. And animators, keyframe animators, and character animators animate the keyframes. And when they go into the game, all of that animation has to get baked down to the joints or the bones. So therefore, once the animator has finished animating her character and baked out her animation, then the the animator's role is no longer necessary, because then it becomes the animation becomes another game asset, and it is applied to, and the animator is no longer interacting with that data. All right, so this is an example of some typical keyframe animation. Now, then what is simulation? Simulation is something that happens in the context of the game, and it tries to produce a procedural animation, or it tries to duplicate a physical motion. And so what we have here is a lot of a complication. There's a lot of physics. There's a lot of math. There's a lot of actual high-end mathematics going on here, and it's cool if you see it once, but in the long run, my indication is try not to rely too much on simulation. Simulation is good in little bitsy pieces, but too much simulation in the long run tends to be boring. This is kind of one of the things that really burns engineers to no end, because they spend all this time working on these really complicated simulations, and they go and put it in game, they put it in the film, and then it just is boring, which is like not because what you're doing is you're reproducing reality. You're reproducing what should be seen. So therefore, it's kind of unpredictable. And regretfully, these visual effects, when they are done in simulation, they're kind of uncontrollable. And so that means is, yes, this is a very controlled situation that you have here, and it's a visual effects simulation that works real well. If you have your basketball animated character, he plays basketball, and he's got his shorts, and the shorts are animated around. There's no guarantee that there won't be a situation of sometime in the game where his pants interpenetrate his legs and his butt might be showing through. It happens all the time. That is one of the risks, that when you're dealing with simulations, you might put the simulation into a state where it does something unpredictable and uncontrollable, and you might ending up on the bloopers reel. Happens all the time. All right. All visual effects have to be done in Engine. Now, I could go on to a long rant on that, but here's my logic here. This is the Cliff Notes version here. All visual effects are animations, right? So therefore, all visual effects are dependent on the rendering engine. So you have animation, and then they have to be rendered in then real time. So that means you've got Unity and Maya, and so Unity rendering engine does not equal the Maya rendering engine. So if you created a visual effect in Maya, it isn't going to translate into Unity. Similarly, if you create something in UE4 and you have to create something in UE in Houdini, they aren't going to match each other. So therefore, you have to develop the visual effect inside of your destination engine. That means you need to understand where this visual effects is going to be seen, and you have to develop the scene in the context of the engine, because you can't copy one visual effect from one package into another. All right, all DCCs are not real time. Some are. Okay, game engines are real time, and then the game engines have been optimized to perform. That means that they've got tweaks, and they've got little shimmies, they've got little kludges and little shortcuts and so forth, and just in order to make your visual effect look awesome. All right, to make the thing play at 60 frames a second. So they're going to be doing lots of nutty things, and this is going to have a dramatic impact on your visual effects. So therefore, you gotta see your visual effect in the context of the game engine, or else it's never going to look correct. All right, gang, that is about it as far as I wanted to talk about the various context between the different types of visual effects and the difference between visual effects and special effects. Stick around for the next lecture when we're actually diving into the 5 different types of visual effects that we're going to be covering in this course.